Cowboy is a handful. I mean, he's just out of hand. He's grumpy. He's pissed. Very proud of what he does. He does an excellent job, but he's wasting 30 minutes coming out and showing me what he's doing. You know, just do the job.
For years, Rick Dale kept his mouth shut. He smiled on camera. He praised his crew. He played the calm leader. But behind the scenes of American restoration, things were never as smooth as they looked. Rumors have followed the shop for years. Tension, frustration, quiet resentment. Fans noticed faces disappear and attitudes change. But the real reasons were never clear. Today, Rick finally breaks his silence. In this video, we reveal the 5 employees Rick has openly struggled with the most, why they tested his patience, and how their behavior nearly tore the shop apart. Brettley Otterman. From the very first episode, Brettley Otterman was never framed as a rising star. He was framed as the joke. Young, inexperienced, and visibly overwhelmed, Brettley quickly became the comic relief of the shop. Rick did not hide where Brettley stood in the hierarchy. Calling him the low man on the totem pole was not just a throwaway line. It was a clear signal to viewers and to the crew. Brettley was at the bottom. While others handled rare artifacts and delicate restorations, Brettley was stuck sweeping floors, sanding parts, cleaning rust, and doing prep work that carried little trust. On camera, Rick constantly corrected him. He questioned Brettley's focus, pointed out careless mistakes, and openly doubted his judgment. The show leaned into this dynamic hard. Every confused look, every slip-up, every moment of hesitation was edited to reinforce the same image. Brettley was the bumbling kid who could not keep up. What made this situation more uncomfortable was that it never really changed. Rick is not someone who enjoys repeating himself. He built his reputation on discipline, precision, and learning through observation. In his mind, a worker either adapts or falls behind. Brettley struggled to adapt. Mistakes repeated themselves. Instructions had to be explained again, sometimes multiple times. Tasks that should have become routine still caused problems. For a viewer at home, it might have looked harmless or funny. For Rick, it was exhausting. Restoration work leaves little room for error. One careless move can damage a piece of history. Watching Brettley stumble again and again was not entertainment to Rick. It was pressure. Over time, the tone shifted. Early patience turned into visible frustration. Teaching moments became sharp corrections. Rick's body language changed. His voice hardened. The patience that once existed slowly drained away, replaced by concern and irritation. Rick's perfectionism plays a major role in why Brettley struggled so much under his leadership. Rick does not believe in lowering standards to protect feelings. He believes pressure reveals character. In that environment, Brettley cracked. Instead of growing more confident, he became more hesitant. Hesitation led to more mistakes. More mistakes led to more criticism. It became a loop that neither of them seemed able to escape. Brettley often looked unsure of himself, second-guessing even simple tasks. Rick noticed that lack of confidence immediately. To him, confidence comes from preparation and effort. When he did not see those qualities developing fast enough, his trust faded further. Fans laughed because the show wanted them to. Brettley's confusion became a running gag. His position as the weakest link made for easy storytelling. But Rick was not laughing. He was running a business that relied on reputation and trust. A shop like his cannot afford weak links for long. Rick worried about what Brettley represented to the rest of the crew. If one person could coast without improving, others might follow. That fear sat heavy with him. Rick has always believed that standards are contagious, both good and bad. One employee stuck at the bottom can pull the entire team down if left unchecked. There was also the issue of time. Television compresses everything. Viewers see minutes of footage where weeks of work actually happen. Rick did not have unlimited time to mold Brettley into a skilled restorer. Deadlines were real. Clients were watching. Cameras were rolling. Every mistake slowed production. Every correction cost time. Over time, Rick's concern shifted from whether Brettley could improve to whether keeping him around was worth the risk. That is a hard calculation for any leader, especially one who values loyalty and patience as much as Rick does. Despite the jokes and light-hearted edits, there was always an underlying tension whenever Brettley appeared on screen. Rick's corrections were not playful. They were deliberate. He was sending a message, both to Brettley and to everyone else watching. Improvement was not optional. Growth was expected. When that growth did not come fast enough, Rick's frustration became harder to hide. Brettley's role never expanded. He was never trusted with the kind of work that builds pride and confidence. That alone speaks volumes about how Rick truly felt. In the end, Brettley's story is less about failure and more about mismatch. He was placed in an environment that demanded speed, discipline, and precision before he was ready. Rick needed results. Brettley needed time. Television did not allow for that gap to close naturally. What viewers saw as harmless humor was, for Rick, a warning sign that something was not working. He did not want to humiliate Brettley, but he also could not ignore the problem. That internal conflict stayed with him long after the cameras stopped rolling. What made this situation even heavier was how visible it all became. Brettley's struggles were not private lessons behind closed doors. They played out under bright lights, surrounded by cameras, crew members, and a growing audience. Every mistake was captured. Every correction was preserved. That kind of exposure can crush confidence faster than criticism alone. Rick understood that pressure, but he also could not afford to soften the truth. The shop's reputation mattered more than comfort. Brettley was learning in the harshest classroom possible, where failure had no quiet corner to hide in. Rick also had to consider how long teaching could reasonably last. Training is an investment, but it requires return. Weeks turned into months, and progress stayed slow. Rick began to feel the strain of carrying someone who could not yet carry himself. That strain showed in his tone, in his posture, in the way he watched Brettley work. He was no longer looking for improvement. He was looking for proof that improvement was even coming. Each day without it made the decision heavier. There was no anger in that realization, just fatigue. Rick did not enjoy being hard on Brettley. He did it because the shop demanded it, and when patience finally ran thin, it was not because Brettley failed once. It was because time ran out. But Brettley was just the beginning. The next employee didn't struggle because of inexperience. He struggled because of attitude. Ron Dale. Working with family sounds easy from the outside. People assume trust comes naturally and loyalty is automatic. In reality, it often creates the hardest situations a leader can face. For Rick, that reality showed itself through his brother, Ron Dale. Ron was not unskilled. He knew the work. He understood restoration. That was never the issue. What worried Rick was habit. Ron had ways of working that did not always match the standards Rick demanded from everyone else. Rick admitted more than once that Ron concerned him, not because he could not do the job, but because of what others might learn from watching him. In a shop where every move is observed, habits spread fast. Rick feared that if Ron's behavior went unchecked, the rest of the crew would start to follow the same patterns. Ron had his own rhythm, and that rhythm did not always respect the clock. He worked at a pace that felt natural to him, not one driven by deadlines or cameras. Sometimes he took longer than expected. Sometimes he approached tasks in a way that clashed with Rick's structured process. Rick runs his shop with discipline. Time matters. Order matters. When Ron drifted from that structure, Rick felt the weight of leadership pressed down on him harder than ever. Leniency toward Ron would have been easy in private, but impossible in public. Rick knew that family cannot get special treatment in a business built on precision. Every time Ron pushed limits, Rick faced an impossible choice. Be a brother and let it slide. Or be a boss and correct him like everyone else. That choice never got easier. Correcting Ron publicly created tension that went beyond normal workplace stress. Rick had to speak to his brother the same way he spoke to employees who were not related to him, sometimes even harsher. He knew that if he softened his tone, the rest of the crew would notice. Fairness in leadership is not about comfort. It is about consistency. Rick took that belief seriously, even when it hurt. Those moments when he had to call Ron out in front of others were not staged. They were real, and they were uncomfortable. The looks across the shop said more than words ever could. Everyone felt it. The tension between Rick and Ron did not explode into open conflict. It was quieter than that. It lived in small moments. A pause before a response. A sharp look instead of a smile. A correction that landed heavier than intended. These moments stacked up over time. Rick carried them with him. Running a shop is hard enough. Running it with family adds a layer of emotional weight that never fully goes away. Rick worried not only about the work, but about the relationship. Every correction risked damage that could not be undone once the cameras were gone. Ron, for his part, seemed comfortable in his own way of working. That comfort may have been exactly what worried Rick the most. Comfort can turn into complacency. Complacency is dangerous in restoration work. One rushed step or careless decision can ruin an irreplaceable item. Rick saw his shop as a reflection of his name and his values. He could not afford to let familiarity weaken those values, even when that familiarity came from blood. The crew noticed the difference in how Rick handled Ron. Not because Ron was favored, but because Rick was stricter. Rick overcorrected at times, knowing that any hint of favoritism would undermine his authority. That pressure shaped how he interacted with his brother. Conversations that should have been simple became loaded. Instructions felt heavier. Expectations felt sharper. Rick was not just managing an employee. He was managing perception, reputation, and family all at once. That tension never fully resolved. It stayed present in the background, quietly influencing the atmosphere of the shop. Rick carried the responsibility alone. He could not vent about it the way he might with other issues. Family problems do not stay at work. They follow you home. They sit in silence. They change how you think. Over time, those unresolved moments chipped away at team balance, not in dramatic ways, but in subtle ones that leaders notice long before others do. Rick never stopped caring about Ron. That made the situation harder, not easier. Caring does not remove responsibility. It increases it. Rick had to protect the shop, the crew, and the standard he built from the ground up, even when it meant putting distance between himself and his own brother. That kind of leadership leaves scars. It demands sacrifice. And it forces choices that never feel right, no matter which path you take. Working with family sounds simple until it isn't. Trust is assumed. Loyalty is expected. But for Rick, working with his brother Ron became one of the most mentally draining challenges he faced. Ron knew the craft. Skill was never the problem. The problem was habit. Ron worked in his own rhythm, at his own pace, and that pace did not always respect structure or deadlines. In a shop where every move is watched, habits spread fast. Rick worried that if Ron's way of working went unchecked, others would start to follow. That fear forced Rick into impossible choices. He could either be a brother and let things slide, or be a boss and correct Ron publicly. Leniency in private meant damage in public. Rick chose consistency even when it hurt. Correcting Ron on the floor created quiet tension. Looks replaced words. Pauses grew longer. The wait followed Rick home. Family problems do not clock out. They linger. Rick pushed harder, not because he lacked care, but because he cared too much. He knew comfort leads to complacency, and complacency ruins craft. Managing Ron meant managing perception, discipline, and blood ties all at once. The strain never fully disappeared. It simply stayed, wearing him down over time. What made the situation even heavier was that there was no clean solution. Rick could not fire his brother the way he might fire any other employee. He also could not ignore the issue without risking the culture of the shop. Every day became a balancing act. Rick had to weigh each correction carefully, knowing it carried more emotional weight than usual. Even small disagreements felt larger because of history, shared blood, and shared expectations. The shop was no longer just a workplace. It became a testing ground for boundaries Rick never wanted to test. The pressure intensified under the cameras. Every tense moment was recorded. Every correction lived forever on screen. Rick knew viewers were watching how he handled Ron, judging his leadership and fairness. That awareness added another layer of strain. He could not afford to appear weak, biased, or uncertain. He had to be firm even when it cost him peace of mind. Over time, that constant vigilance drained him. There were moments Rick questioned himself. Was he pushing too hard or not hard enough? Was he protecting the shop or damaging the relationship beyond repair? Those questions followed him long after the workday ended. The burden of leading family never lifted. It simply settled deeper, turning every workday into an emotional endurance test. Cowboy, Kevin Lowry. Rick did not choose his words lightly when he described Cowboy as the grumpiest guy in the shop. That line was not meant to get a laugh. It was a warning wrapped in honesty. Kevin Lowry, known to everyone as Cowboy, had real skill. He knew restoration work. He understood tools, materials, and technique. On paper, he was valuable. But the moment Cowboy walked into the shop, the energy shifted. His mood arrived before he did. Silence followed. Conversations tightened. People became cautious. Rick noticed it immediately. A shop is not just a workspace. It is an ecosystem. One person's presence can change how everyone else works, thinks, and feels. Every restoration shop carries pressure. Deadlines loom. Clients expect perfection. Mistakes cost money and reputation. Most workers carry that pressure quietly. Cowboy did the opposite. He carried it outward. His frustration became visible. Complaints slipped into everyday conversations. Short tempers flared over small things. Sharp comments cut through the room without warning. Rick believed negativity spreads faster than mistakes, and Cowboy proved that belief correct again and again. One bad attitude can infect a crew quicker than a broken process. People start walking on eggshells. They stop speaking freely. Creativity shuts down. Focus turns into tension. Rick respected Cowboy's craftsmanship. That respect made the situation more complicated. This was not about laziness or incompetence. It was about presence. Rick watched how others reacted when Cowboy spoke. He saw shoulders tense. He heard voices lower. He felt the mood shift. Over time, Rick realized that managing Cowboy required constant effort. Conversations had to be measured. Feedback had to be careful. Conflicts had to be diffused before they escalated. That kind of management drains energy from everything else. Instead of focusing on builds, Rick found himself managing emotions. Leadership is not just about results. It is about balance. Rick understood that even the best worker can become a liability if their attitude disrupts the team. Cowboy's frustration did not stay contained. It leaked into the shop. Rick worried about what that constant edge was doing to morale. People work best when they feel steady, not when they feel braced for impact. Cowboy's unpredictability made the environment heavier. It slowed momentum in ways that never show up on a schedule, but always show up in results. There were moments when Rick tried to give Cowboy space. He understood that some people work better alone, but even isolation could not fully contain the problem. Tension has a way of finding cracks. A look, a comment, a sigh. These small signals add up. Rick watched it happen in real time. He saw how one person's mood could dominate a room. Over time, that dominance became exhausting. Rick's leadership style values respect and discipline. He believes that skill earns opportunity, but attitude determines longevity. With Cowboy, those two values collided. Rick could trust his hands, but not his energy. That imbalance gnawed at him. Managing Cowboy felt like a constant negotiation. Every day started with uncertainty. Would today be calm, or would tension flare before lunch? That question alone was a problem. No leader wants to walk into their own shop bracing for conflict. The longer it went on, the clearer the pattern became. Cowboy did not adjust. The stress did not lessen. Rick began to see that effort spent managing Cowboy outweighed the value of the work itself. That realization is one of the hardest for a leader to accept. Talent should be an asset, not a burden. When it becomes the latter, something is broken. Rick felt that imbalance deeply. It never sat right with him. The crew felt it too. Even if no one said it out loud, everyone sensed the strain. When a team member consistently brings tension, it affects trust. People stop collaborating freely. They protect themselves. That shift undermines everything Rick worked to build. A restoration shop depends on teamwork as much as skill. One person cannot carry the weight alone, no matter how talented they are. Rick never denied Cowboy's ability. That made the decision harder, not easier. He respected the work, but he could not ignore the cost. Over time, Rick learned a hard truth. Energy matters. Atmosphere matters. A leader cannot sacrifice the health of the whole for the strength of one. Cowboy's presence forced Rick to confront that reality every single day. Yet even Cowboy's attitude did not worry Rick as much as the next name on this list, Tyler Dale. Tyler Dale grew up surrounded by tools, history, and expectation. The shop was not just a workplace to him. It was part of his environment from an early age. Rick saw potential in Tyler long before the cameras arrived. He saw ability, familiarity, and natural comfort around restoration work. But Rick also knew something else just as clearly. Potential means nothing without effort. Talent alone does not build a legacy. Rick openly admitted that Tyler could be lazy at times, and that worried him more than outright failure ever could. Failure can be corrected. Laziness, once it settles in, becomes a habit. Rick believes work ethic is taught, not inherited. Growing up in the shop gave Tyler access, not entitlement. Rick wanted Tyler to earn his place the same way everyone else did. Watching Tyler coast while others pushed harder felt like a warning sign. Rick saw moments where Tyler relied on comfort instead of discipline. Comfort is dangerous in restoration work. It leads to shortcuts. Shortcuts lead to mistakes. And mistakes damage reputations that take years to build. Rick worried that familiarity with the shop had dulled Tyler's hunger. When you grow up around something, it is easy to stop seeing its value. Rick's concern was not quiet. He did not hide it. He corrected Tyler openly on camera. He pushed him harder than he pushed others. Not because he enjoyed doing it, but because he felt he had to. Rick understood how optics worked. Viewers saw a father being tough on his son. What they did not always see was the fear driving those moments. Fear that talent would be wasted. Fear that Tyler would never feel the urgency needed to carry the shop forward. Fear that the next generation would not respect the craft the way it deserved. Those corrections created visible tension. Tyler often appeared frustrated, defensive, or disengaged. Rick noticed that too. He watched for signs of growth. He waited for hunger to show itself. Some days it did. Other days it didn't. That inconsistency bothered Rick deeply. Consistency is everything in restoration. One good day followed by 3 careless ones does not balance out. Rick needed reliability. He needed proof that Tyler understood the weight of the name attached to the shop. There is a unique pressure that comes with working alongside a parent. Tyler was not just being judged as an employee, he was being judged as a future standard-bearer. Rick knew the crew was watching. If Tyler was allowed to drift, others might assume standards were optional. Rick could not allow that. So he pushed harder. He spoke sharper. He demanded more. Those demands did not always land well. But Rick believed leadership meant making hard choices before problems became permanent. The cameras amplified everything. Every correction became a moment. Every pause was captured. Every frustrated look was replayed. That visibility added another layer of pressure. Rick could not soften his expectations just because it was his son. In fact, he felt he had to be stricter. Fairness demanded it. The shop demanded it. Rick knew that respect from the crew depended on consistency. Any hint of favoritism would undermine everything he stood for. Tyler's comfort in the shop became both his strength and his weakness. He knew the environment so well that it no longer challenged him. Rick wanted him to feel pressure, to feel responsibility, to feel the weight of expectations. Without that weight, growth stalls. Rick worried that Tyler did not fully grasp how fragile a reputation can be. Restoration is unforgiving. One careless moment can undo years of trust. Rick carried that knowledge every day. He needed Tyler to carry it too. The emotional toll of pushing Tyler was heavy. Rick was not just correcting an employee. He was shaping a future he cared deeply about. That made every criticism personal, even when it was necessary. Rick knew that protecting Tyler's feelings would cost him more in the long run. He chose discipline over comfort, even when it strained their dynamic. Those choices are rarely appreciated in the moment. They only make sense years later, if at all. Rick's fear was not that Tyler would fail once. It was that he would never feel the urgency to succeed fully. That fear lingered in every conversation, every look, every correction. Rick pushed because he believed pressure creates strength. Whether Tyler absorbed that lesson or resisted it remained uncertain for a long time. What was clear is that Rick was unwilling to let potential drift away without a fight. And then came the final blow, the one Rick never fully controlled. American restoration producers. The biggest conflict Rick faced was never personal. It was not about ego, attitude, or effort. It was structural. Over time, Rick and the producers of American Restoration stopped seeing the show through the same lens. What began as a celebration of craftsmanship slowly shifted into something else. Production wanted faster builds, shorter timelines, more dramatic moments, more turnover. The show needed pace. It needed energy that fit television rhythms. Rick wanted something very different. He wanted time. He wanted care. He wanted loyalty. He believed restoration was about respect for history, not manufactured tension. That difference in vision grew quietly at first. Early seasons still felt balanced. The work came first. The drama was natural, born from real challenges. But as ratings pressure increased, priorities shifted. Producers began pushing for quicker results. Builds that once took patience were expected to wrap faster. Personalities mattered more. Conflict made better television than careful sanding or slow research. Rick felt that shift immediately. He knew when storytelling started to outweigh craftsmanship. For him, that imbalance was not just frustrating, it was dangerous. Rick built his reputation on trust. Clients trusted him with pieces that could not be replaced. He could not rush that responsibility to fit a filming schedule. Every shortcut demanded by production felt like a compromise of his values. Rick pushed back. He insisted on standards. But television has its own logic. Time costs money. Drama keeps viewers watching. Over time, Rick realized he was fighting a current stronger than himself. The show was changing whether he agreed or not. By season 7, the writing was on the wall. The original crew was replaced. Not because they failed, not because the shop collapsed, but because the show's direction changed. Production wanted a reset. New faces, new energy, a different tone. Rick did not lose his shop. He did not lose his skill, but he lost control of how his work and his people were presented. That loss cut deeper than any argument ever could. For Rick, the crew was not interchangeable. They were craftsmen. They were part of the identity of the shop. Watching them sidelined in favor of a new format felt like erasing history. The show moved on, but Rick could not follow. He saw something he cared about becoming something he did not recognize. That realization was painful. Years of work, trust, and shared struggle were suddenly treated as replaceable. Fans felt the shift immediately. The tone changed. The rhythm changed. The heart changed. Viewers who loved the slow, detailed process noticed the absence of familiarity. The soul of the show felt thinner. Something authentic was missing. Comments reflected confusion and disappointment. The connection that once made American Restoration special weakened. Rick saw it too. He knew the audience felt what he felt. That decision ended an era, not with a dramatic farewell or a public feud, but with quiet distance. Rick did not storm off. He did not make accusations. He simply stepped away from a version of the show that no longer reflected his values. That silence was intentional. Rick has always believed that work speaks louder than words. He did not need to explain what had happened. The absence said enough. The shift marked the end of American Restoration as Rick envisioned it. The shop remained. The craft remained. But the spotlight moved elsewhere. Rick returned his focus to what mattered most to him: quality, integrity, control over his work. Television had offered exposure, but at a cost he was no longer willing to pay. What makes this conflict stand out is its quiet nature. There was no public battle, no dramatic statements. just separation. Rick chose to protect his standards rather than chase a format that demanded compromise. That choice defined him more than any episode ever could. It showed that for Rick, success was never about screen time. It was about doing the work the right way. The silence that followed was not weakness. It was clarity. Rick understood that not every ending needs explanation. Sometimes walking away says more than any argument ever could. American Restoration continued, but the version fans fell in love with was gone, and Rick knew it. Rick Dale never chased fame. He chased quality. And when the balance broke, he chose his standards over television. If you want more real stories from behind your favorite shows, like the video, leave a comment and subscribe. And make sure to watch the next video on screen, because this story goes deeper than anyone expected.